Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today, we're talking all about Wolves Nuggets on Saturday night, previewing that matchup, what to expect between the Wolves and the Nuggets. Will Nikola Jokic play for Denver? Whether or not he does, what does that matchup look like? Also, a few Timberwolves notes, who got assigned to the G League, and more upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm also the co-editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the Fansided Network. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Today on the show, we're talking all things Timberwolves Nuggets, previewing the weekend series for the Northwest Division rivals, the Denver Nuggets. We're also going to talk some quick Wolves notes here off the top, where the Wolves sit in the standings now after about 10 days or so of the regular season. We're going to get to all that on the show today. First of all, though, thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Remember, Locked On Wolves is free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube as well as Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course, the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, let's go ahead and start with some Timberwolves notes, and then I want to spend most of the show talking about Wolves Nuggets. That matchup, Nikola Jokic seems 50-50 maybe at best that he plays Saturday. Either way, obviously a difficult game for Minnesota, returning home to play against the Denver Nuggets, a team that is actually currently a game behind them in the Northwest Division standings. But more on that in a minute. First, though, the notable news from Thursday: Leandro Bolmaro has been assigned to the Iowa Wolves of the G League. Perhaps not really a surprise. Their season's getting underway here soon, and he's only, of course, played in the first game of the season. That was the blowout win over the Rockets. Bolmaro played in the fourth quarter of that game and is not part of the rotation. He's probably like the 11th guy in the rotation, and the Wolves are playing 9 or 10 each game. And I mean, it just makes sense to assign him to the G League. Chris Finch said on Thursday to the media that basically the only reason he's not playing is because of the Wolves' depth, that he has showed enough that he thinks he is ready to play. It's just the Wolves are a deep team. Of course, Josh Okogie didn't even play in Wednesday's win over the Milwaukee Bucks. So Bolmaro is a couple of players out of the rotation. And it makes sense for him to go to Iowa and continue to get acclimated to the G League / NBA style of play, which is obviously a little different than what he experienced in Europe. And we'll see how he does down in Iowa. I'm sure he'll get called up at some point in the not too distant future, but it makes sense to assign him down there and see how he does with the Iowa Wolves. So we'll keep an eye on that, as well as all the Exhibit 10 players. You know, the 4 guys who were signed to Iowa, who were part of training camp for the Wolves. Bowen and McKinley Wright, actually, on the 2-way contract, was just recently assigned to the G League as well. So in addition to him, Bowen, Isaiah Miller, the point guard, handful of guys that are going to be a lot of fun to watch down in the G League. I believe Chris Silva is still with the team. So we'll keep an eye on the Iowa Wolves throughout the season and talk about them here on the show as their season progresses. Also related to the standings currently. So this is through play on Thursday, recording this after all the NBA games finished Thursday evening. The Timberwolves are tied for the 3rd best record in the Western Conference. The Utah Jazz are the only remaining undefeated team in the NBA. They're 4-0. Nobody else is undefeated. Golden State is 4-1, and there's 4-1 teams in the Eastern Conference. The Wolves and Mavs are the only 3-1 teams in the Western Conference. So the Wolves and Mavs are actually tied right now for the 3rd best record in the West. Half game ahead of the Memphis Grizzlies, 5th. Of course, it's ridiculous to talk about standings at this point, 4 to 5 games into the season, depending on which team you are. But the Wolves are second in point differential in the Western Conference. The Jazz are far and away number 1 in point differential. Why is that important? Basically, a Pythagorean win-loss record. The point differential can help predict future performance based on, and there's obviously some noise there, right? It's not perfect, but for the most part, if you win games by larger margins, obviously you're a better team, right? It's simple math. there's a lot of luck to close games. And yes, over the course of a certain number of close games, better coaching, better players, better execution, those things do matter. And that's why a lot of times the better team will win in a short playoff series, but there's still a lot of randomness, right? And so obviously this early in the season, there's a ton of randomness, but still, for whatever it's worth, the Timberwolves are second in point differential in the Western Conference. The Jazz are a plus 18.3, the Wolves are plus 5.3, just a tenth of a point ahead of the Golden State Warriors, who are plus 5.2 and are 4-1 this season. Just lost their first game of the season. They lost to Memphis by 3 in overtime on Thursday. A big performance by John Morant. The Grizzlies, incidentally, are just a half game behind the Wolves, and they have a point differential just negative point 0.6 in the East, because it's the East. Of course, there's 4 teams that are 4-1, and there are geez, like 6 teams with better point differentials than the second best team in the West, which is the Wolves. So who knows what's going on in the East? A lot of those teams beating up on the Magic, Pistons, and surprisingly the Pacers, who stand at 1-4 in the Eastern Conference. But for the most part, I mean, I guess the biggest surprises through the first 10 days of the season would be the Spurs are 1-4, which is a mild surprise. The Clippers are 1-3, and the Suns are 1-3 in the Western Conference with a minus 8.5 point differential. Really significant. The Lakers are 2-3, of course. And there's a lot going on there with injuries, etc. In the Eastern Conference, the Knicks being 4-1 is a surprise to me. I think I predicted before the season they'd probably finish under their win-loss prediction this year, just because I think they maybe were a little bit ahead last year of where they should have been in terms of their where they ended up in the season, ended up at the end of the season. The Bulls are 4-1. I took the under on them as well. Charlotte's 4-1. Washington's 4-1. So you look at the top 4 in the East: the Knicks, Hornets, Bulls, Wizards. Who was supposed to be in the top? It was supposed to be the Heat. They're 3-1, which, so I guess they're fifth. The Nets, who are just 2-3. The Celtics are 2-3. The Sixers are 3-2. The Hawks are 3-2. So, of course, just a game is separating most of those teams from the teams at the top, but still notable that things are, and actually really just a great snapshot of, we're 10 games in. Don't get too excited or too upset about what's going on. If you're a Wolves fan, don't get too excited, although we've seen a lot of positives and the Wolves are trending in the right direction. There's a lot of weirdness going on right now. I don't think the Lakers missed the playoffs in the West. I don't think the Knicks are the 1 seed in the East when it's all said and done. I don't think the Sixers and Nets miss the playoffs in the East. There's a lot of weird stuff still. That said, doesn't take away from what the Wolves have done so far this season, going 3-1, and including, of course, the biggest win by far so far, beating the Bucks in Milwaukee on Wednesday night. So, what I want to do next on the show here today, I want to talk about the Nuggets matchup on Saturday night. The Nuggets scheduled to this point, who they've played, also their injury status as a team, what to look for in the matchup, looking back to last year's games against the Nuggets. All that's kind of what I want to spend the rest of the show on, is what to expect Saturday night. Before we get to all that, though, let's talk about the title sponsors of today's show. And that, of course, is McDonald's. This episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. Long road trips is actually where my family always goes to McDonald's. If we're traveling in the morning, we'll stop and get sausage egg McMuffins. My wife gets the Canadian bacon McMuffin. My kids and I love the sausage egg McMuffin. Fantastic. Late nights, working late, we'll pick up McDoubles from McDonald's, the 24-hour McDonald's that's down the street from our house all the time. It's a thing that our family is very used to doing, and any family who enjoys delicious food, McDonald's is the place to go. Head to your local McDonald's to refuel and connect. Did somebody say locked on watch party at McDonald's? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. I feel like I'm getting better at that. The more I do it, I feel like it's improving. All right. Next, what I want to do is I want to talk about the matchup against the Nuggets. So we're going to hit that next year. Okay. Wolves Nuggets. So let's look first at who the Nuggets have played to this point in the season. Denver at this point is 2-2. At the time of this recording, they played Dallas Friday night. They've had a weird schedule. So they opened last Wednesday like the Wolves did. They played last Friday. Then they had a back-to-back home against Cleveland on Monday of this week, at Utah the following night, off Wednesday, Thursday, and then a back-to-back Friday, Saturday, home for Dallas, at Minnesota. So very strange. Home, road back-to-back, home for 2 days, home game against Dallas, and then they travel up I-35 via the air, via plane, of course, but up I-35 to Minnesota to take on the Wolves on Saturday. So Minnesota actually gets Dallas on the second night of a back-to-back, just like they got the Pelicans on that last weekend. So I've talked before about how favorable the Timberwolves schedule is early this season. Not only do they play like 6 of their first 7 at home, and outside of the Bucks game and this Nuggets game, it's a fairly easy schedule. A couple Clippers games upcoming. Obviously, they're still good, but no Kawhi. But also consecutive weekends, getting a team on a road back to back where the Wolves are at home, not playing about, actually having 2 off nights to prepare is significant. And especially for the Nuggets, Nikola Jokic hurt his knee on Tuesday against Denver, got hurt, came out at halftime, warmed up. It looked like he could come back in, didn't come back into the game. He's questionable for Friday's game against the Mavericks. Again, as of this recording, we don't know if he'll play or not. I'd be surprised if he plays against Dallas just a couple days after what looked like it could have been a serious knee injury. So at this stage, it's probably 50-50 at best. He plays against Minnesota Saturday. I think the Wolves have to assume he does play, but that will be the big story. To this point, the Nuggets opened the season with a 12-point win on the road against the defending Western Conference champs in the Phoenix Suns. They beat them 110-98 on opening night. And then they played the Spurs at home and beat them by 6. Had 2 days off, had last weekend off, and then played Cleveland at home and lost to Cleveland by 12. There was the Facundo Campazzo, Ricky Rubio dust up, which was entertaining. And then the back-to-back, they go on the road after losing at home to Cleveland on Monday. They go to Utah and lose by 12 on Tuesday in a game where, again, Jokic didn't play in the second half. So they're 2-2 to this point this season. The Mavericks game Friday night's an ESPN national game. So be sure to check that out if you want to get a look at the Wolves' opponent for Saturday. Again, I'd be surprised if Jokic plays on Friday against the Mavs. So the Nuggets could very well be 2-3 coming into this game against the Wolves on Saturday night. So an interesting season for them to this point. In terms of what the Nuggets have done so far this year, so I've talked about their record and who they've played against, but to this point, the Nuggets are actually number 1 in field goal percentage in the league. This is through play on Thursday, but they're last in free throw attempts per game and free throw percentage. They're only attempting 13.3 free throws per game through their 4 games this season, and they're shooting a hideous 64.2% from the line, which is just shocking. Even in a 4-game stretch, that's unbelievable. It's less than 2/3 of your free throws made. It's like worse than a college team typically. So we'll see. I mean, again, there's a ton of noise here. We're 4 games into the season, but being first in field goal percentage and last in free throw attempts and free throw percentage is interesting. Middle of the pack in 3-pointers, below middle of the pack, kind of, 19th in 3-point attempts per game and 17th in percentage. They're not a great rebounding team to this point in the season. Now, the Wolves haven't been in recent years, and they weren't a couple of times. The win over the Pelicans, they were like a -16 on the glass last weekend, but they rebounded really well against the Bucks. We're a +6 against a solid rebounding Bucks team, even without without Brook Lopez on Wednesday. The Bucks are still a good rebounding team. So the Wolves have a chance, especially if Jokic doesn't play, to do really well against the Nuggets on the glass. And that's one of the keys, I think, that we don't talk about enough for the Wolves is, can they rebound the ball? In 4 games, Jokic has a rebound percentage of almost 26%. Towns is like at 13% to this point in the season. And outside of him, Aaron Gordon is the only regular member of the rotation with a rebound rate in double figures at 13.4%. Next up is Michael Porter Jr. at 9.3% rebound rate, which is not, I mean, I guess for the position that Michael Porter Jr. plays in his role, that's fine. But the Nuggets are not a great rebounding team. And I mean, that's an area with Jared Vanderbilt playing heavy minutes for the Wolves. They play bigger lineups. The Wolves should do well there. And the Nuggets have been fairly middle of the pack rebounding the ball in recent years anyway. So I think that'll be a key to the game on Saturday is whether or not Jokic plays, the Wolves need to crash the glass like they did against the Bucks. They obviously need to scramble defensively, but also secure possessions and not allow the Nuggets to get significant second chance opportunities. And that's going to be really important to this game. But again, interesting look so far this year for the Nuggets. They're also last in turnover percentage. They've turned the ball over a ton. And if Jokic doesn't play, so much of their offense runs through Nikola Jokic, right? I mean, he leads this team in assists. He has for the last couple of years, assists per game, assist rate, whatever, however you want to measure it. He's their assist guy. If he doesn't play, turnovers could be an even bigger issue for the Nuggets. Aaron Gordon has struggled when asked to do similar things with the ball in his hands. He's second on the team in turnovers. And I mean, Monty Morris is now in the starting lineup with Jamal Murray, of course, still out with the ACL injury, might return later this season, probably late in the year. So he's been pressed from one of the league's better backup point guards into a starting role. What does this offense look like with no Nikola Jokic if he doesn't play Saturday? And even if he does, to this point in the season, the Nuggets offense is bottom 5 in offensive rating. They're 25th coming into play on Friday. They're top 10 in defensive rating. But again, the offense has been sloppy. It's been a little bit disjointed, and they haven't shot the ball. They haven't gotten to the free throw line very much at all and haven't done too well from outside the arc. So an opportunity for the Wolves. Um, the Pelicans, it would have been great to beat the Pelicans twice, for no other reason than to get the tiebreaker over the Pelicans, to start to accrue wins over teams like Denver, division opponents in the Northwest Division. Denver's, of course, projected to finish in the top 2 or 3 in the West. The Wolves are supposed to finish somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, right? So the tiebreaker may not matter that much, but we don't know that. And if the Wolves get a chance, we don't know this, but if they get a chance to play with no Jokic on the floor for the Nuggets, that's a real opportunity for Minnesota to score a win against a divisional opponent and a team where the tiebreaker could end up mattering later in the season. We don't know. I want to talk more about this matchup specifically and also take a peek back at last year's Wolves Nuggets matchups, what happened in those games next. Before we do that, though, let's talk about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. I promise you, it's delicious. It tastes exactly like a candy bar. There are tons of different flavors to choose from, including new fall flavors right now at builtbar.com. There's a blueberry muffin, which is phenomenal. It's a top 3 flavor in my opinion. Paranormal pumpkin, the puffs, those are there too. They're delicious. But if you've never had Built Bar, or even if you have and you want to try some new flavors, get the mix box. So get 2 of each of the 9 staple flavors at builtbar.com. Cherry barcia, coconut, salted caramel, cookies and cream are some of my favorites. Anything with caramel, anything with coconut, honestly. And not only do they taste delicious, but they're also healthy for you. They are protein bars, after all. Check out the macros: 17 to 18 grams of protein, just 130 to 180 calories per bar, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and just 4 to 5 grams net carbs per bar. Built Bar is also the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. You can go to builtbar.com and use the promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at builtbar.com. Let's also talk about betonline.ag. We're back and we're better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. You can head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball to football, baseball, postseason to NHL, boxing, and UFC, right on down to your favorite Las Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Again, betonline.ag, promo code locked on to receive that 50% welcome bonus. Okay, let's wrap up the show here today by continuing to talk about Wolves Nuggets and take a peek back at last season between the Wolves and Nuggets and what that matchup looked like. So last year, the Wolves and Nuggets only played 3 times. Remember, it was just a 72 game season. It's kind of weird. They played twice early in the year. And of those 2 games, the Timberwolves were extremely shorthanded. This was after, remember, the Wolves got off to a 2-0 start. Towns hurts his wrist in game 2 of the season, late in the victory over the Jazz. Shortly after that, D'Angelo Russell hurts his hamstring. I think it's like 2 games later. So the first time the Wolves and Nuggets play, it's in Denver, and Minnesota loses by 15. The Wolves starting lineup in this game: D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, former Nugget, of course, Jarrett Culver at the 3, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, former Nugget, at the 4, and Ed Davis at the 5. And key players off the bench, the top 3 minutes getters were Naz Reid, Anthony Edwards, Jake Layman, Ricky Rubio was next in minutes, and Jaden McDaniels, Jared Vanderbilt just played in garbage time. This was, folks, this is what, just over 10 months ago, just in January of 2021. This was after the calendar turned to 2021. How different this team looks. Edwards coming off the bench, no Towns in this game. Uh, Jarrett Culver, Juancho Hernangomez, Ed Davis in the starting lineup. We talk about how they didn't do much this offseason, but I'll tell you what's not happening this year is Jarrett Culver and Ed Davis and Juancho Hernangomez starting for the Minnesota Timberwolves in 2021-22. The Wolves lost this game by 15, and it was actually pretty competitive. They were only down 7 at halftime. I remember this was like actually a one possession game going to the fourth quarter. The Nuggets put them away, and this was actually the game in Target Center. The following game, the very next game, was actually in Ball Arena in Denver, formerly Pepsi Center. The Timberwolves lost by 7 in that game. Same starting lineup for the Wolves. We saw a lot more Anthony Edwards. He had 15 points on 19 shots in this game. Rubio came off the bench, played 21 minutes, and was scoreless. The Wolves lost by 7 to Denver. And this one was the Nuggets came out and got an early lead in it. The Wolves actually didn't see the Nuggets again at all until the very end of the season. It was the third to last game, May 13th. So the Wolves went from back consecutive games, January 3rd and January 5th, 4 months later, more than 4 months later, 4 months and 2 weeks later on May 13th, the Timberwolves played the Nuggets at home and lost by 11 to Denver. Of course, Denver was playoff bound. The Wolves obviously were not. The Wolves were close to full strength, though. Of course, D'Lo, Karl-Anthony Towns were both healthy. Edwards is in the starting lineup at this point. Ant dropped 29 on 16 shots, 4 of 9 from outside the arc, 29, 7, and 5. Cat had 20 and 11 with 4 assists. D'Lo had 17 points in this game. So the Wolves were competitive. But Denver, Jokic had 31, 14, and 4. Aaron Gordon had 15, and JaVale McGee, who of course is no longer with Denver, had 12 and 13 for the Nuggets. And this was obviously after Jamal Murray had gotten hurt, torn the ACL. He played in the first 2 games against the Wolves last year. But this was a game Denver was up double digits at halftime. Minnesota made it close going to the fourth quarter, but then the Nuggets put the Wolves away with some solid fourth quarter defense. Towns and Jokic have always played each other fairly evenly. It's like a bizarro version of the Towns and Embiid matchup where they kind of go after each other in a weird way. There's a lot of flailing. There's a lot of complaining to the officials, as both the players are wont to do. Although we saw Towns not complain at all on Wednesday against the Bucks. We'll see which Towns shows up on Saturday. If that's a new, like, as Jim Peterson called it on the Valley Sports North podcast, a Zen version of Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't know if that's a thing moving forward or not. But the Towns Jokic matchup, I hope Jokic plays, honestly, because first of all, obviously we don't wish injury on anybody. So it'd be great to see Jokic healthy and back on the floor. And also, it's just fun to watch Towns and Jokic go at it. Jokic usually gets his and gives Towns some trouble. But I think the way the Wolves are now playing pick and roll coverage is going to give the Nuggets some pause. It's going to be very different from how Denver's seen the Wolves play them in the past, blitzing the pick and roll, playing at the level versus drop coverage. And I think of any team, though, the Nuggets are one of those teams that could break this fairly well with passers like Jokic and Campazzo, Aaron Gordon to some extent as well. Obviously, not anywhere near the level of Jokic, but Denver is a team that I think should be able to handle blitzing the pick and roll very well. Now, of course, they are still without they're still without Jamal Murray, as we know. They do have JaMychal Green coming off the bench, hasn't played quite as much this season as I would have expected. Same with Austin Rivers. They've kind of got a weird supporting cast. Will Barton is now a starter for them. He used to be kind of their sixth man. Monty Morris was their backup point guard, was one of the better backup point guards in the league. He's now a starter. Jeff Green's a big part of the rotation. I've never been the biggest Jeff Green fan. It's a roster full of names that you know, right? They're names that the casual NBA, well, maybe not casual, but the semi-casual NBA fan would recognize. Like, oh, Jeff Green, yeah, JaMychal Green, Austin Rivers. These are all guys that have been around, right? But with no Jamal Murray and with a banged up Nikola Jokic, it's not nearly as fearsome as a team as one might expect. I still think the Nuggets are probably a top 4 team in the West, but this is not the Denver Nuggets to necessarily be feared on Saturday. And the Wolves, for all intents and purposes, are full strength and knock on wood that continues moving forward. So this should be a fun matchup. I think it'll be a close game. I mean, it could obviously go either way. The Nuggets are going to be favored in this game. The line's not out on BetOnline. Not out yet on betonline.ag. Of course, Denver plays Friday night. We have no idea if Jokic is going to play Saturday, much less Friday, or Friday, much less Saturday. I think the Nuggets will probably be favored by a few points, 3-4 points, especially if Jokic plays. If not, it's probably a lot closer, maybe 1.5 or 2 points on the road against Minnesota. But this is a winnable game for the Wolves, for a full strength Wolves team coming off a big win against the Bucks. They just got to make sure to not have a letdown. And they shouldn't be looking ahead, right? The schedule's not super difficult for Minnesota moving forward. They get another day off on Sunday and then have Orlando at home Monday before. Honestly, I think the Denver game is one the Wolves should be able to put all their horses out there, play really hard, win the game. Maybe Orlando's the game that they look past to the 2 games against the Clippers next week, but they should be locked in to play Denver. If they can beat Milwaukee on the road, Denver at home twice in consecutive games, you know, on Monday, when we talk about power rankings from the weekend, the Wolves are going to be in the top 16 in the league if they're 4-1 with wins against Milwaukee and Denver this week. This would be a fun win if the Wolves could manage to pull it out against Denver. This is an 8 p.m. tip, by the way, on Saturday. So we'll actually be after the show. We will have the post game pod on the weekend. So late Saturday into early Sunday. Pay attention. Make sure you're following and subscribe to the show. We will have a post game pod even on the weekend. A reminder that you can listen anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's also Locked On Wolves is also free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And thank you also for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. A quick reminder, you can follow on Apple, Google, Spotify, and of course, the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and my account at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Again, post-game pod Saturday. Be sure to be listening to that. Our last reminder that Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.